Welcome back, faithful friends and seekers of divine mysteries. In the quiet corners of our spiritual journey, we sometimes encounter stories that transcend ordinary understanding, moments when heaven's veil grows thin and the extraordinary breaks through. Today, we return to the life of a humble Capuchin friar whose extraordinary connection to the divine continues to inspire millions. This is a story of profound sorrow and boundless compassion, of tears shed by the Mother of God herself, witnessed by a saint who bore the wounds of Christ. The Italian countryside of San Giovanni Rotondo breathed with ancient rhythms when Padre Pio, born Francesco Forgione, arrived at the monastery of Our Lady of Grace in 1916. The stone walls of the modest sanctuary stood sentinel against a landscape of rolling hills and olive groves, a fitting backdrop for a man whose life would become a living testimony to supernatural realities. Those who knew Padre Pio often spoke of his eyes, dark, penetrating, seeming to look beyond physical reality into the very soul of those he encountered. His hands, marked with the stigmata, the wounds of Christ's crucifixion, were both a blessing and a burden he carried for 50 years. It was in the early hours of a spring morning in 1919 when the first extraordinary encounter occurred. The monastery was shrouded in pre-dawn stillness, the kind of quiet that feels almost sacred in its completeness. Padre Pio had been at prayer since midnight, kneeling in the small chapel where he often spent hours in communion with God. The single oil lamp cast gentle shadows across the walls, illuminating the carved wooden crucifix that hung above the altar. According to his own testimony, later shared with his spiritual director, Father Agostino, it was in this moment of profound contemplation that the atmosphere of the chapel changed. The air seemed to grow heavy with a presence, Padre Pio would later recount, not oppressive, but weighted with sorrow so profound it pressed upon my heart like a physical burden. Before him, near the altar, appeared a woman of indescribable beauty, clothed in blue and white, her hands clasped in prayer. It was the Blessed Mother, yet her face, usually portrayed with serene compassion in the icons and paintings that adorned the monastery, was streaked with tears that seemed to shimmer with heavenly light. "My son," she spoke, her voice both gentle and piercing in its clarity, "do you see these tears? I weep for those who are forgotten in prayer, for the souls who have no one to remember them." The Virgin's words came not as sound through the air, but as direct understanding in his heart. "So many of my children lie in darkness, waiting for the light of prayer to guide them home to my Son. They suffer because they are forgotten." Padre Pio, overwhelmed by the vision and the depth of sorrow it conveyed, found himself unable to speak. He would later describe feeling as though his heart might break from the weight of witnessing such divine grief. "Each tear that fell from her blessed eyes," he told Father Agostino, "contained within it the suffering of countless souls, like oceans of pain held in each drop." The Virgin Mary continued, revealing to Padre Pio the plight of souls in purgatory, those who had died in God's grace, yet required purification before entering the fullness of heaven's glory. She showed him, in a manner beyond ordinary vision, the suffering of these souls who waited for prayers that never came, for remembrances that had faded with the passing of generations. Families had moved on. Names once spoken with love had been erased by time's relentless march. "They call out," the Virgin Mother said, "but their voices do not reach the world. They thirst for prayer as the parched earth thirsts for rain." According to Padre Pio's testimony, the Blessed Mother then extended her hands toward him, and in her palms he saw what appeared to be countless tiny flames, each one, she revealed, representing a soul awaiting deliverance. When the vision subsided, Padre Pio remained motionless in prayer until the first light of dawn broke through the chapel windows. Brother Giuseppe, who came to check on him, found the friar still kneeling, his face wet with tears. He appeared transformed, Brother Giuseppe later testified to the monastery's abbot, not merely tired or moved, but as one who had witnessed something that altered him at the very core of his being. This first encounter would prove to be only the beginning. Over the next several months, the Virgin Mary appeared to Padre Pio with increasing frequency, always with tears that seemed to contain the suffering of all humanity within them. Each visitation brought new revelations about the forgotten souls, those who had died without family, those whose relatives no longer practiced the faith, those whose memory had been swallowed by time and circumstance. Father Pellegrino Funicelli, a fellow Capuchin who served as Padre Pio's assistant in later years, documented the saint's description of these apparitions. The Blessed Mother showed me that for every prayer offered, for every Mass dedicated to these souls, a light shines in their darkness, Padre Pio confided. She told me that even the smallest act of remembrance brings them consolation beyond earthly understanding. During one particularly profound visitation in December of 1921, as winter wrapped the monastery in its cold embrace, Padre Pio witnessed the Virgin Mary weeping not only for the forgotten souls in purgatory, but also for those still living who walked through life without faith or hope. These too are forgotten souls, she told him, forgotten not by heaven, but by themselves. They have forgotten their own divine nature, their eternal destiny. The impact of these visions transformed Padre Pio's already dedicated prayer life. Those close to him noted that he began to celebrate each Mass with even greater intensity, often pausing at moments when others saw nothing unusual. Sister Pascalina Lehnert, who occasionally visited the monastery from her service in Vatican City, wrote in her private journal, "When Padre Pio elevates the host during consecration, his face reflects an encounter with something or someone invisible to ordinary eyes. He once told me, at this moment they gather around the altar, the forgotten ones, drawn to the light of Christ, like moths to flame." The suffering of these souls became so real to Padre Pio that he instituted a special practice among his spiritual children, the growing community of believers who sought his guidance. He asked each person who came to him for confession to adopt at least one forgotten soul in their prayers. "You need not know their name," he would instruct. "Ask the Blessed Mother to choose for you a soul most in need of your prayers, and then remain faithful to this invisible companion until you sense their journey is complete." Maria Pompilio, one of Padre Pio's spiritual daughters, who kept meticulous diaries of his teachings, recorded his explanation of how to recognize when a soul had completed its purgation. "You will feel a sudden lightness in prayer, as though a weight you had not fully recognized has been lifted. Some may experience a dream or a moment of unexpected joy. Others might sense nothing at all, but should trust that their prayers have borne fruit in God's time, not ours." What made these visions particularly remarkable was how they contradicted the common portrayal of the Virgin Mary in the religious art and literature of the time. While traditional depictions showed her as the Mater Dolorosa, the sorrowful mother, at the foot of the cross, they rarely captured her active, ongoing suffering for souls across time. Through Padre Pio's testimony, believers encountered a mother whose compassion extended beyond the historical moment of Christ's passion into an eternal now, where she continued to weep for all her children. The theological implications of these visions did not escape the attention of church authorities. In 1922, Father Raffaele da Sant'Elia a Pianisi, the provincial superior of the Capuchins, arrived at San Giovanni Rotondo to investigate the growing reports of supernatural phenomena surrounding Padre Pio. After extensive interviews and observation, he wrote in his confidential report to the Holy Office, "The friar speaks of these visions not with the excitement of one seeking attention, but with the reluctance of one bearing a burden he would rather not carry. His descriptions contain theological nuances that would be unlikely to originate from imagination or deception. Indeed, Padre Pio's visions of the Weeping Virgin aligned with Catholic teaching about the communion of saints and the efficacy of intercessory prayer, yet they added dimensions of understanding that felt both ancient and new. The idea that Mary not only interceded for souls, but actively grieved for them, that divine love could manifest as divine sorrow, resonated deeply with those who heard of these apparitions. By 1923, word of these visions had spread throughout the surrounding villages and beyond. Pilgrims began arriving at the monastery in increasing numbers, hoping to hear directly from the friar about the Virgin's tears and the forgotten souls. Padre Pio, however, became increasingly reticent to speak publicly about his mystical experiences, preferring instead to channel this divine revelation into practical spiritual guidance. During this period, he established prayer groups dedicated specifically to the forgotten souls. These groups, meeting weekly, would offer not only prayers, but also small sacrifices, fasting, acts of charity, moments of silence in a busy day, all dedicated to those who had no one to pray for them. Even your smallest suffering, offered with love, Padre Pio instructed these groups, becomes a cooling stream in purgatory's fire. The most profound transformation, however, occurred in Padre Pio's celebration of the Mass. Those who witnessed his liturgies during this period often spoke of losing all sense of time, as though the 20 or 30 minutes of the celebration expanded into an experience of eternity. The friar would often remain motionless during the consecration, tears streaming down his face, his expression reflecting both agony and ecstasy. "It is then that I see them most clearly," he confided to Father Agostino. "As Christ becomes present in the Eucharist, the veil between worlds grows thin. The Blessed Mother stands always at the foot of this living Calvary, her tears falling now not only for her Son, but for all her children who suffer in separation from him." Perhaps most moving were the occasions when Padre Pio seemed to physically experience the Virgin's grief. Several witnesses described moments when, during prayer or Mass, tears would suddenly begin flowing from his eyes with such abundance that they would dampen his vestments. Yet these were not common tears of human emotion. Those closest to him described them as having a subtle fragrance of roses, the scent often associated with Marian apparitions throughout Catholic history. Antonio Massa, a physician who examined Padre Pio during one such episode in 1924, later wrote in his medical journal, "The phenomenon defies scientific explanation. The volume of tears exceeded what would be physiologically possible from the lacrimal glands, and they continued for over an hour without diminishing. The friar remained fully conscious and coherent throughout, though in a state of evident spiritual absorption." As Padre Pio's health declined in later years, these visible manifestations of shared suffering with the Virgin Mary became less frequent, yet his dedication to the forgotten souls never wavered. Even when confined to his cell, barely able to stand without assistance, he maintained a rigorous schedule of prayer that began at midnight and continued until dawn, with special emphasis on what he called the hours of greatest abandonment, between 3 and 5 in the morning. Sister Pia d'Appolito, who assisted in caring for him during his final years, recalled how he would often pause in conversation, close his eyes briefly, and then resume speaking. When asked about these moments, he explained simply, "A soul was passing. I needed to accompany them with prayer." This immediate response to the needs of the dying, especially those dying alone or without spiritual comfort, became so much a part of his daily experience that those around him came to recognize the signs and would join in silent prayer when they occurred. In his final days in September 1968, as his strength ebbed and his breathing grew labored, Padre Pio was heard whispering repeatedly, "The souls, the forgotten souls, remember them." When a brother friar leaned close to better hear his fading voice, Padre Pio gripped his hand with surprising strength and said with sudden clarity, "Her tears continue to fall. Do not let them fall in vain." Padre Pio's legacy regarding the forgotten souls and the weeping Virgin continues to inspire devotion today. Prayer groups formed under his spiritual guidance still gather worldwide, dedicated to remembering those who might otherwise remain forgotten. Monasteries and convents maintain perpetual prayer intentions for abandoned souls, and countless individuals have adopted his practice of spiritual adoption for the anonymous dead. The message revealed through these mystical encounters speaks to a profound truth at the heart of Christian faith: that love transcends death, that compassion knows no boundaries of time or space, and that even the most forgotten soul remains precious in the eyes of heaven. In a world that increasingly values only what is visible, measurable, and immediately present, Padre Pio's witness to the Virgin's tears reminds us of unseen realities that demand our attention and response. Perhaps most powerfully, these visions reveal a mother who continues to weep for her children, not from helplessness, but from a love so vast it cannot help but manifest as compassionate tears. And in those divine tears, paradoxically, we find not despair, but hope, for they testify that no soul, however forgotten by earth, is ever truly forgotten by heaven.